Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to our reading of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, where we specifically focus on the single paragraphs of self-consciousness. So if you want to read the Phenomenology, which is a notoriously difficult book, then this is intended to be a commentary that maybe makes it easier for you. I remember when I started reading Hegel, I needed about 2 hours per page. Now I'm a bit older. I already got my PhD on Hegel, but I have to admit, I don't understand everything. Nevertheless, I hope that it reduces your time of investment on each page and that it maybe motivates you a bit more to read Hegel. And if you really want to be motivated in reading that, then it would maybe even be helpful if you discuss in the comment section. But that's another question. So today, let's focus on paragraph 167. Let us have a brief summary of what has happened before. Paragraph 166, we said, yeah, okay, what is self-consciousness? Consciousness of consciousness. That means that consciousness looks at itself. And with this self-observation, which in the future we will call reflection, there come some certain characteristics that are very different from looking at objects. Because here we look at an object, which is an object that looks at ourselves. So the subject looks at itself in the form of an object that looks like an object that looks at itself, and so on and so forth. Now there seems to be a certain infinite circle that we are running into, and maybe we keep that in mind. Nevertheless, what does he say in paragraph 166? Well, he gives a short summary of what has happened before, but he says that here finally certainty is identical with its truth. What does that mean? The subject that usually is certain of its surroundings, but which figures out that it cannot be certain of its surroundings because its surroundings constantly changing, now actually discovers the first truth, that it is maybe capable of knowing, and that is itself. So in a sense, the project is quite Descartesian, so we have to figure out how this project is different from Descartes, who also wanted to find the truth in the cogito, where it says, like, I think, therefore, yeah, this is the absolute foundation of science. Consciousness is to itself the truth, but we run into a paradox here. And what is the paradox? In this, there's indeed an otherness. So in the subject that tries to grasp itself, there is an otherness. And what is that otherness? That is to say, consciousness makes a distinction. So it says, okay, I don't just look at myself as a subject, I look at myself as another. I'm distinguished from myself. But one which at the same time is for consciousness not a distinction. So it says, I look at myself as another, kind of an outside perspective, but wait, that is me. And so he gives us first a definition of the I, that is the particular structure that looks at itself. And he says that is the content of the connection and the connecting itself. So in paragraph 167, we will now investigate this particular realm of truth. We read, with self-consciousness, then, we have therefore entered the native realm of truth. We have now to see how the shape of self-consciousness first makes its appearance. So we don't just grasp self-consciousness, we see how it appears in front of our eyes. If we consider this new shape of knowing, the knowing of itself in relation to which preceded, namely the knowing of another, then we see that though this other has indeed vanished, its moment have at the same time no less been preserved, and the loss consists in this, that here they are present as they are in themselves. Okay, difficult sentence. Again, what I've learned from my teacher, from my great teacher, great German philosopher Claudia Bickmann, who unfortunately died way too early. If you want to understand a sentence, just take it apart, part by part. And don't bring in too much from the outside. Try to just operate with the sentence itself. So what do we have here? So we have a new shape of knowing, which is self-consciousness. And he defines that as self-consciousness knowing itself. And this stands in relation to that which preceded it. What is that? It is knowing an object, right? So the object is another, but that the other precedes it, and it somehow has to make the other vanish. So what is the other? Before, we weren't just starting with the self, right? We started with natural consciousness. And what is natural consciousness for Hegel? It means that we direct our view at our surroundings and that we say, this here now, this is certain. And this is the seed of all truth, mind-independent reality. But then we figure out, well, wait, like how can we know that if it's really mind-independent, then it is actually outside of ourselves. And if it's outside of ourselves, then how do we ever connect to it? So what happens in the aftermath is that Hegel realizes that that which is supposedly outside is already in us. And so this other vanished, but its moments have been preserved. So what is the loss? The loss is that we have lost the in itself of reality, the fact that we take reality to be in itself, but now we have the moments as they are for us. The mere being of what is merely meant, the singleness and the universality opposed to it of perception, as also the empty inner being of the understanding, they are no longer essences, but are now moments of self-consciousness. So before we had a three-stage process. We went through sensing the world, but then we realized that sensing the world is not really possible. So we move on to how we take the world to be, which is perception, the second part. But then we realize that there we are also not completely just perceiving what the world is. We have to move on to understanding, trying to understand what is the inner essence of the world, which turns out that we understand the world in terms of forces, but also that does not work. And so the essentiality of these moments disappears, but they are preserved as how they are for us. We just don't take them to be in themselves anymore. And so that means that there are moments in self-consciousness for us, that is, abstractions or distinctions which at the same time have no reality for self-consciousness and are purely vanishing essences. So reality in terms of a mind-independent reality. That is what they've lost, and so they are also vanishing in their essence. Thus it seems that only the primal moment itself has been lost, that is, the simple self-subsistence existence for consciousness. So self-subsistence, something that is entirely independent, disappears. So let's read on. Thus it seems that only the principal moment itself has been lost. I already read that. But in the point of fact, self-consciousness is the reflection out of the being of the world of sense and perception, and is essentially the return from otherness. Now, what does that mean? It means that self-consciousness is a result of the dialectical sublation, as Hegel calls it, the dialectical overcoming of what we took to be the senses and perception. And we took them to be the real reality outside of us, but we retreat from that. We now go into ourselves and investigate ourselves. So we return from reality, from the other, into ourselves. As self-consciousness, it is movement. But since what it distinguishes from itself is only itself as itself, the difference as an otherness is immediately superseded for it. So self-consciousness is the movement where it returns into itself. And now we have this complicated sentence where he gives an explanation, where he also explains why it is movement. But since what it distinguishes from itself only itself as itself. So, okay, it distinguishes self-consciousness. And what it distinguishes only itself as itself, the difference of an otherness is immediately superseded. So I think that the return from reality is not really a return from reality. That is what he says here, because distinguishes from itself is only itself as itself. So I think reality becomes here something that is for itself again. It's its own production. But since what it distinguishes from itself is only itself as itself. So yeah, we don't have the itself anymore, right? I think Hegel is an idealist, which means that the mind-independent reality is not really discussed. He doesn't deny it, but he says at the same time, well, do we have a way of really discussing it? And I believe that Hegel says no. The difference as an otherness is immediately superseded for it. The difference is not, and it is only the motionless tautology of I am, I. So, okay, there's no difference anymore, right? There's no difference where the I distinguishes itself from the outside world. It just becomes completely itself. I am, I am, I am, I. And that's also a trap where Descartes ends in, where he says, well, now that I have doubted everything, I just find myself. And then he has to prove, however, that an outside world exists, and he does that by a more complicated proof of God. And I think after Kant, the tradition after Kant, including Hegel, does not believe anymore in proofs of God. So therefore, this is a route that Hegel probably doesn't want to go, but he also criticizes this motionless tautology of I am I. It's just formal. But since for it, the difference does not have the form of being, it is not self-consciousness. So yeah, it cannot give itself immediately reality anymore because it has retreated from reality. It just discusses itself. And that was also a problem that Descartes actually faced. So we somehow need to get a term of reality into it. Hence, otherness is for it in the form of a being or is a distinct moment. But there is also for consciousness the unity of itself with this difference as a second moment. So the otherness from which it retreated has the form of a being, but now we are more concerned with ourselves. But now he also discusses even a second moment, which is the unity of itself with this difference. And so so it does not want to take itself just as this motionless tautology, I am I, right? It wants to say, but wait, I'm somehow connected to something that is real, even though I cannot really discuss it. And I think that is the second moment here. I may be wrong on that. If you think I'm following here the wrong track, please let me know in the comments, because I admit this is here already a bit interpretive what I do. With that first moment, self-consciousness is in the form of consciousness, and the whole expanse of the sensuous world is preserved for it, but at the same time only as connected with the second moment, the unity of self-consciousness with itself. So yeah, it seems there are two moments of self-consciousness. On the one hand, we have the natural consciousness, from which we retreat. That's the object that we observe, but we say it's just about us, I am I, am I. But somehow we say, no, but wait, we are actually still in connection with that kind of consciousness that exists with regard to a mind external reality, if we can say it that way. Maybe my terminology is a bit off here. And hence, the sensuous world is for it an enduring existence, which, however, is only appearance, or a difference which in itself is no difference. So, okay, we have here the sensuous world as endurance. Nevertheless, for self-consciousness, it's only appearance. because it also says it's in unity with it. But it's not real. It remains to be appearance for self-consciousness. This antithesis, and I believe we shouldn't translate that as antithesis, because then we believe Hegel does a thesis-antithesis here, which he probably doesn't do. We should translate it with this opposition of its appearance and its truth has, however, for its essence only the truth that is the unity of self-consciousness with itself. This unity must become essential to self-consciousness. That is, self-consciousness is desire in general. And again, this sentence is incredibly difficult here. So let's go through it step by step. So we have the antithesis between appearance and its truth. So the native realm of truth is self-consciousness. And then we have the appearance of, I would say, the natural consciousness. However, for its essence, only the truth that is the unity of self. So for self-consciousness, only the unity of self-consciousness with itself is relevant, not the way of how natural consciousness, for example, relates to an outer realm, a mind-external reality. So therefore, we must focus on the unity, and we must really understand it. And now he says that self-consciousness is desire in general. So what is it really? It's a completely digesting structure that wants to destroy the otherness, but it does not want to destroy otherness. It's like the example of a cake. When you have a cake, you want to eat the cake, but you don't want to destroy it, right? If you destroy it, you just smash it with a hammer, or I don't know, you smash it with your hands. You want to make the otherness part of you in a sense that the otherness disappears in you. Like, that's desire. So I think Finlay says that the otherness stops being otherness or something. So, and I think we can accept that that is just a definition, a nominal definition of desire here. So consciousness, as self-consciousness, henceforth has a double object. One is the immediate object, that of sense certainty and perception, which, however, for self-consciousness has the character of a negative. Okay, so we have this natural consciousness that is still preserved as a moment in self-consciousness, and that natural consciousness is sensing and perceiving, but we don't take that in any positive way. We say, yeah, this is what really gets reality. No, we say, this is something from which we retreated. It's a negative. It belongs to us in the sense of how we retreat from it. And the second, that is itself, which is the true essence and is present in the first instance only as opposed to the first object. So we have the true essence of self-consciousness that, however, in the way it makes its first appearance, seems to be opposed to its object of natural consciousness, that which it also observes and which it tries to preserve in its unity. In this sphere, self-consciousness exhibits itself as the movement in which this antithesis is removed and the identity of itself with itself becomes explicit for it. And this is what I say is the structure of desire. It wants the otherness disappear, but how does it want to do that? By technically destroying it, like eating something, right? Like you destroy a cake, even though you make it part of yourself. But this is like the destructive nature of self-consciousness, that it wants to know everything. And once it knows it, it's completely part of it. Okay, so this was paragraph 167 of reading Hegel. I hope I could make that a bit clearer to you so that you don't invest like 2 hours for just reading the paragraph with little results, because that also happens sometimes. I read 2 pages and then I thought what he said, but I was wrong. And that's maybe what philosophy is. You think something, it's wrong, you think something. Again. Yeah, but let's just summarize. So first of all, what is it? Why do we have to do that? So it seems to be similar to the movement of Descartes. We really want to define what is the seed of truth so that we can start a more genuine project of sciences, a science that is somehow grounded. Not on a foundation, but that we know how sciences work in their internal structure, that it is a movement between something that we take to be in itself and that becomes for itself. And we basically clarify this relationship by investigating the structure that is responsible for it. What is that structure? self-consciousness. Habermas, for example, would criticize that because he would say self-consciousness is kind of a metaphysical subject. Let's not really deal with it. But for Hegel, and I think he makes good arguments, self-consciousness is a very relevant topic. And I think even though it is metaphysical, I think we can, or it seems to be metaphysical, I think we can investigate self-consciousness in a reflective and yet non-metaphysical way. So what is that self-consciousness? He defines it's the return from the world. I said that it's in relation to what is the natural consciousness before. And it does not, however, want to destroy that otherness completely. It wants to preserve it in its unity. And therefore, it has the structure of desire, which I think is here a really important part. Self-consciousness is desire in general, and in particular, it may look a little bit different. I hope you enjoyed this talk. It took like about 22 minutes to go through a page of Hegel again. You see digesting Hegel takes a long time, but I think it's very beneficial. It trains your brain, makes you thinking in more complex structure, and if Hegel is successful, it also makes you understanding sciences better. So if you think that was useful, then also look for the other paragraphs that I will analyze line by line. It's a line by line German hermeneutic investigation. And yeah, if you liked it, then just give it a like. Stay with me, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell, whatever. Hit anything. Follow me on my other channels. I put the points into the description. And for now, I just say thank you. Live long, read more Hegel, and prosper.